Welcome. This is James Corbett of the Corbett Report with the EyeOpener from BoilingFrogsPost.com. Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas is scheduled to visit New York next week to unveil a formal bid for Palestinian membership in the United Nations. The bid has been widely reported since its announcement this month and has been fiercely opposed by the United States and Israel, who fear that such a bid represents a unilateral move on the Palestinians' part toward implementing a two-state solution, something that they argue must be the result of negotiations between the parties. The Palestinians have expressed frustration with Israel's refusal to extend a 10-month moratorium on settlements in areas that are likely to be part of a future Palestinian state, and its rejection of the use of the 1967 borders with land swaps as the basis for a two-state solution. Now all sides are shaping up for protracted political wrangling, as the specter of a Palestinian UN membership bid has upset the balance of power in an already volatile region. In an Interpress Service report on the issue, Amos Yadlin, a former head of intelligence for the Israeli Defense Force, was quoted as saying that the process threatens to set the whole Middle East on fire. And former Saudi ambassador to Washington, Prince Turki Al Faisal, has penned an op-ed in the New York Times warning that this move will have a knock-on effect in the region. American influence will decline further, Israeli security will be undermined, and Iran will be empowered, increasing the chances of another war in the region. Yet despite the great furor that the proposed membership bid has generated, it is still not clear that even those in the press who are covering the issue understand exactly what the process is in such a situation, or even what forms of UN membership are available. Earlier this week, I talked to Joe Lauria, UN correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, about what type of membership Palestine is seeking, how that membership is granted, and what the ramifications of attaining that membership would be.
What the UN could give are two things. Well, one is membership in the United Nations, full membership. There are 193 countries in the UN. They would like to be in the 194th country. The process for becoming a member of the United Nations is to be a state already. As I said, 122 countries have recognized that. Then you have to go through the Security Council, which it must be approved there, and then it must go to the General Assembly for approval on a majority vote. In the Security Council, as your listeners might know, there are 15 countries. 5 of them are permanent. They've been there since 1945. China changed from Taiwan to Beijing in the 70s, but it's been China, the United States, Britain, France, and Russia. The victors of the Second World War have been the permanent members. That means they're always there. They're not elected. They are always members of the Security Council, and they have veto power. So it's an enormously powerful position, and there's 2 tiers in the Security Council. Any resolution that comes to the Security Council must get 9 votes in favor and no vetoes. So even if the 5 countries, permanent members all vote, if there's only 7 countries, only 2 others agree, it's not a passed resolution. But if 14 countries agree, and only one of those 5 say no, it is defeated in a veto. The United States has gone on record very clearly and said repeatedly now they will veto a resolution put forward in the Security Council for UN membership for Palestine. So there's no way Palestine is going to become a member of the United Nations. So I think the wise thing might be to skip that stage and go to stage 2, and that is to go directly to the General Assembly. Don't go to the Security Council. But as I said, to get membership in the UN, you must go to the Council. So what could they get at the General Assembly? In 1974, the UN recognized the Palestinian Liberation Organization as a representative of the Palestinian people, and they were given a status at the UN, a permanent observer mission. They have an ambassador there. He can make speeches and really very little else. Can't participate in voting. They can't join any UN agencies or like UNICEF or the IAEA or maybe the International Criminal Court. This is not open to Palestinians. All they can do is have a representative there and speak at meetings. When the Security Council meets every month, discuss the Middle East, the Israeli ambassador speaks. Palestinian representative there, Mr. Mansour, he will speak on behalf of the Palestinians, but he can't vote. Israelis can vote not in the Security Council, but they can vote in the General Assembly. They're not on the Security Council. So what could they get in the General Assembly that they don't have now is an upgrade from permanent observer mission to a non-member state, or the official word is a permanent observer state as opposed to a permanent observer mission. What does this give Palestinians? It gives them It gives them all rights in the General Assembly except voting, and they cannot sponsor legislation. They can't run for any positions on committees, but they would be able to join some agencies.
Unconfirmed reports from Debka are now claiming that Abbas and the Palestinian Authority have conceded to the combined diplomatic pressure of the United States, Saudi Arabia, Europe, and Egypt in backing off their quest for full UN membership. If true, it will greatly diffuse the situation by avoiding a direct US veto in the Security Council. Regardless of what form of membership the Palestinians pursue, a vote in favor of observer status by the General Assembly would bolster the Palestinian Authority's negotiating position with Israel and would further isolate the American-Israeli axis, which has already been dealt a number of diplomatic blows this year, including Israel's recent spats with former allies Turkey and Egypt. Earlier I talked to Pepe Escobar, roving reporter and investigative journalist for the Asia Times Online, about what the Palestinian UN bid means for Israel and what the likely ramifications this process is likely to have in the region.
If you analyze what Barak, Olmert, Livni, Bibi have been saying for the past 10 years or so, it's always the same thing. We are for peace, we want to negotiate, we have no preconditions and all that. But when you delineate some sort of roadmap to start negotiations, they always backtrack. And they start building more settlements. So what was the response these past 2 or 3 months? Building more settlements, in fact, because they knew that this the General Assembly would be inevitable. They know for at least 6 months that the Palestinians will go with that because this is the Palestinian plan A and there's no plan B. There's nothing else left for them in terms of, okay, let's get a measure of support from the world at least. We're not going to get our state. We're not going to get a sovereign state, but this is our first step. They tried everything. They even start thinking, look, if the Israelis' response is really hardcore, we're going to have an intifada number 3. And if we have an intifada number 3, most of world public opinion will be on our side after what happens at the UN. So this is the only thing left. Like, they are in such a fragile situation. But Israel, as a sovereign state and as the most powerful army in the Middle East, the only country with nuclear weapons in the Middle East, they are as fragile as the Palestinians in terms of international public opinion at the moment. And this is astonishing when you think of it. Even in Europe, they lost public support, including in countries where Israel was always viewed with extremely cozy, like France, for instance. Even Sarkozy is starting to considering voting for Palestine at the General Assembly, at the floor. So this would be unthinkable a few months ago. And we all know that Sarkozy is, in France, he is considered the Jewish lobby nec plus ultra, you know. So you see how things change. And the thing is, I was struck by the indignados, the outraged movement in Israel, which was a social justice movement, right? These demonstrations all over Israel, especially in Tel Aviv. But this did not translate into a political movement. I said, let's bring down this government because they are putting our backs against the wall. So I didn't understand the lack of transition. You know, you can protest against the government saying that our standard of living is horrible because of these government's policies. And at the same time, you don't criticize their political decisions. It doesn't make sense.
It is being almost universally reported that Israel is becoming increasingly isolated in the region in the wake of the Arab Spring, and recent problems with formerly close governments in Ankara and Cairo have seemed to add to those problems. Last year, the Israeli Defense Force stormed the Mavi Marmar, one of the ships in the Gaza Freedom Flotilla, killing 8 Turkish citizens and 1 Turkish American. A recent UN report alleges that the IDF used excessive force in the raid, causing Turkey to expel the Israeli ambassador earlier this month and demand an apology from the Israeli government. Then, just 1 week later, an angry Egyptian crowd stormed the Israeli embassy in Cairo, forcing the majority of Israeli diplomats to flee back to Israel. These developments have been seen as devastating blows to Israel, and with the added diplomatic pressure of a possible Palestinian UN membership bid, many have been openly speculating about whether this might be a period in which Israel's role in the Middle East will be completely redefined. Underneath the fiery rhetoric, however, is the reality that the status quo that has existed in the region for decades is unlikely to be upset by these transitory events. Just this week, Turkey announced its willingness to host a controversial NATO radar site that is part of a proposed US missile shield that is aimed at intimidating Iran. The shield is a key part of the US strategy in maintaining Israel's complete military dominance in the region. In Egypt, the unruly crowds that stormed the Israeli embassy have been rebuked by the military junta that has been effectively ruling that country for decades. Saying they will take appropriate measures to make sure that such a scene does not repeat itself, the incident looks unlikely to fundamentally alter the Egypt-Israeli relationship, at least as long as the military remains in power. Ultimately, Washington, infamously dominated by the Israeli lobby, and Israel itself have too much invested in the current balance of power in the Middle East for that to be altered so quickly. Although the Palestinian attempt to gain UN membership represents a wild card in the deck, most observers are expecting the hand, once dealt, to come out in favor of the House once again, and for Israel to continue with its illegal land grabs in the West Bank and its illegal blockade of Gaza with the complete impunity that America's military, economic, and geopolitical dominance bring to the table. This video is part of a new weekly video news series. Future editions of this series will be available to subscribers of BoilingFrogsPost.com. For more news and commentary from James Corbett, please visit CorbettReport.com.